China is one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations, a culture that measured time not in decades, but in dynasties. For thousands of years, it saw itself not as just another nation among many, but as the center of civilization itself. Empires rose and fell around it, yet China endured. And then, in the 19th century, something happened that shattered this worldview almost overnight. Foreign ships appeared on its shores. Foreign weapons tore through its armies. Foreign demands rewrote its laws. And at the center of it all was a drug, a war, and a humiliation so deep that China would vow never to forget it. This is why the Opium Wars were not just wars. They were a psychological breaking point. A moment when China learned, brutally, that history could turn against even the most ancient of empires. To understand why China never forgot the Opium Wars, we must first understand the world China believed it lived in before them. For centuries, the Qing dynasty ruled over a vast, wealthy, and populous empire. China produced silk, porcelain, tea, and knowledge the world desperately wanted. In contrast, it saw European traders as barbarians from distant lands, useful only for trade and tribute. Foreign merchants were tightly controlled, confined to limited ports, and forced to bow to Chinese authority. This worldview bred confidence, but also complacency. While Europe industrialized, China relied on traditions that had worked for centuries. Its military technology stagnated. Its bureaucracy grew rigid. Its leaders believed China needed nothing from the outside world. That illusion would be destroyed by British merchants and opium. By the late 1700s, Britain faced a massive trade imbalance with China. British consumers were addicted to Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. But China had little interest in British goods. Silver flowed out of Britain and into China at alarming rates. Desperate to reverse this imbalance, British traders turned to opium grown in British-controlled India. Opium flooded into China illegally, despite repeated bans by the Qing government. Addiction spread rapidly, hollowing out families, draining productivity, and corroding the state itself. Officials were bribed. Soldiers became addicts. Entire regions weakened from within. The Qing court understood the danger. Opium was not just a social problem, it was a national crisis. In 1839, the emperor appointed Commissioner Lin Zexu, a man of integrity and resolve, to eradicate the trade. Lin confiscated and destroyed massive quantities of opium and sent a letter to Queen Victoria, appealing to morality and fairness. The response was not diplomacy. It was war. Britain, armed with steam-powered gunboats and modern artillery, launched what would become known as the First Opium War. The conflict exposed a horrifying truth. China's once feared military was utterly obsolete. Wooden junks faced iron ships. Swords and spears faced cannons. Qing forces were overwhelmed again and again. In 1842, China was forced to sign the Treaty of None, the first of what it would later call the Unequal Treaties. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain. Ports were open to foreign trade. Extraterritoriality meant foreigners were no longer subject to Chinese law, and opium, though still technically illegal, continued to pour in. The moral lesson of the First Opium War was painfully clear. Arrogance and isolation had left China defenseless. A civilization that believed itself eternal had been humiliated by industrial power. But the story did not end there. The Second Opium War, fought in the 1850s and 1860s, deepened trauma. Britain, now joined by France, demanded even greater concessions. When negotiations failed, foreign troops marched again. This time, the humiliation reached its symbolic peak. In 1860, British and French forces looted and burned the old Summer Palace in Beijing, a cultural treasure filled with art, history, and memory. Its destruction was not just military, it was psychological. It told China that its heritage, its pride, and its sovereignty meant nothing to foreign powers. From China's perspective, this was not just defeat, it was violation. The moral lesson here was even darker. Weakness invites cruelty. When a nation cannot defend itself, even its culture becomes a target. The Opium Wars triggered what China later named the Century of Humiliation, a period lasting roughly from 1839 to 1949. During this time, China lost territory, autonomy, and dignity. Foreign powers carved out spheres of influence. Internal rebellions exploded. The Qing dynasty collapsed. Millions. And through it all, the memory of the Opium Wars became a national wound. Unlike many historical defeats, this one was never framed as a tragic misunderstanding. In Chinese historical memory, the Opium Wars were the result of deliberate exploitation. A powerful empire forced drugs onto a weaker society, then used military violence to protect its profits. This narrative matters deeply because it shapes how China interprets the modern world. To China, the Opium Wars proved that morality does not protect nations' power. This belief influenced everything that followed. Reformers argued China must modernize or perish. Revolutionaries claimed the old system had failed. Nationalists vowed that China would never again be bullied by foreign powers. Communists later used the memory of humiliation to rally support, promising to restore dignity and sovereignty. When the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, it framed itself as the end of humiliation and the beginning of renewal. The Opium Wars became foundational myths lessons, carved into textbooks, museums, and political speeches. The moral lesson taught to generations was simple and unforgiving. Forget history, and you will be destroyed by it. Even today, echoes of the Opium Wars shape China's behavior. Its emphasis on sovereignty, its sensitivity to foreign criticism, its insistence on national unity are rooted in the fear of repeating past humiliation. When China speaks of never again, it is not abstract. It is remembering burning palaces, forced treaties, and gunboats on its rivers. This does not mean China sees itself only as a victim. Rather, it sees itself as a survivor that learned harsh lessons. Strength must be built. Technology must be mastered. Foreign dependence must be avoided. National pride must be defended. The Opium Wars also carry a warning beyond China. They reveal what happens when profit overrides humanity, when empires justify harm in the name of trade, and when power is used without restraint. The addiction crisis that devastated China was not an accident, it was a business model. The final moral lesson is universal. Civilizations fall not only from external attack, but from internal decay and moral compromise. China never forgot the Opium Wars, because forgetting would mean risking repetition. Memory became armor. History became strategy, and humiliation became motivation. Today's China, for all its contradictions and controversies, is driven by a singular promise to itself: never to be weak again, never to be carved up again, and never to let outsiders decide its fate. That promise was born in smoke, addiction, and defeat, but it continues to shape the balance of power in our modern world. If you want to understand China's past, present, and future, you must understand this. The Opium Wars are not over in Chinese memory. They are a warning, a scar, and a reminder that history never truly dies. And if you found this story valuable, subscribe to Echoes of Empires, where we uncover the hidden forces, forgotten lessons, and true stories of power that still shape our world today.